Hi, I'm Paul Roberts. This is Conscious Counseling 101, and I was asked to speak about illness. And I could take a lot of different tacks. I could talk about, what the Bible says about illness, the chosen people and how God related to them. I could talk about what Jesus did to heal. I could talk about things like that, but I'm trying to reach the broadest audience possible. And I know a lot of people will immediately dismiss those things away if I take that tact. Now, if you'd like me to talk more on this with that tact, I'd be glad to. But what I'd like to talk to you about today is what illness really is and why we have it. It's not what you would think. People think of it as cancer. People think of it as all the different diseases we have and the way the body responds to our environment in a negative way. It just can't keep going on. It just can't thrive under the normal circumstances that it's exposed to. And this goes into like all the different realms. If you're in too much heat, too much cold, if you're in outer space, underwater, you drown. These things are all about illnesses and the body's precarious nature, its vulnerableness. But I'd like to suggest that a lot of the ideas that we have about illness and how it looms over us, and we just can't seem to get a grip on what it all means, it's really not so much as we would think about how it's a thing in and of itself. It's really not completely a thing in itself. It is a thing in itself, but it's really a symptom or a cause and effect, if you will, for the way man is dealing as mankind or personkind or whatever you want to call it with their state of affairs in this world and how much they care about the wholeness of mankind and the earth and the harmony and so many different things like that. And a lot of illness that's exacerbated, that doesn't have to be as bad as it is, or doesn't have to be as all-encompassing as it is, could be avoided if all people will work together to be healthier and be smarter and to care for one another and to do preventative maintenance and to have those types of things be what we do. But we don't do that on the whole. And of course, I could go into the biblical tie-ins with that and why love of money is the root of all evil, and capitalism and the way this society functions and the various cultures around the world and every power play they have going on to keep their people at bay and in place so that they'll continue to yield what needs to be yielded for that society or what is deemed most important to be yielded for that society to make a person worth their salt. If there was some way to make all people care about trying to resolve illnesses, trying to get to where we can do more for the individual, we wouldn't have as many problems as we have with illnesses. We'd still have them, but let's take a couple, for example, like say cancer. One day that'll probably be resolved. And I don't know, but let's just say it's on the graph of man's time, it'll be resolved here. All right. Unless it's a miracle that it's resolved there, the reason why it will be resolved right there is because we didn't bump it up more. Because we didn't put that as an emphasis. That's not what we were about as a people. So several things happen. We don't put the resources we need into saying that's what's important. Healthcare, solving humankind's crises and diseases. What's important is making the individual do what he must in order to get by, so that the people that set those parameters and decide on those rules and laws will be happier than they would otherwise if they weren't served by the power play that they had over the individual. If it wasn't for the negative ways that people are when they have the ability to have power over others and they use it selfishly, they could be more aiding and more about. The people that are higher up, that have more power and come to power on earth, could be more about. Let's take a look at this. Let's work together on this. But it doesn't get there. Like, for instance, if you look at America right now, for instance, we're very divided. The people that have and the people that thrive off of what the people that have and how they live like that, they have to keep that going. The people that are trying to make it some other way, they'd like to do it on their own, or maybe not completely lob onto the system, but the people that are hurting and trying to rise up and make something of themselves, or the people that are destitute and down, they're the other side. And both sides tend to think that they can't work in harmony. They can't get together and find that happens in a way that it'll work towards a better humankind solution scenario. And so we're at odds. And so no matter what we do, even with healthcare, I'm not saying with the healthcare that we have, if it's free, that it's actually going to get us closer to cancer solving. But what it could do is it could make it so that we're a strong country or a strong world, or I'm talking for America right now. And we could have a better workforce, stronger military, healthier, happier people. But we don't, because we're always worried about what if we don't have what we need tomorrow. Who can we push into a place or make a power play for so that we can have what we have tomorrow? And I would like to submit to you that not only is this type of way of being causing us to not put our efforts as a global society or a country society where they could be to working towards these illnesses, but we're actually causing more illnesses by what we do. For instance, if we keep each other down to where we don't have economic ability to be strong and healthy, we cause people to make choices that aren't the best because they have no choice. Fast food, for instance, or glamorizing Coca-Cola and sugar beverages that do nothing for you, and making it harder to have the high quality foods available. Because let's face it, it takes a lot of work to grow things and to have enough and not inject artificial genealogy in there. And even there, they try to rule over all things by saying, hey, this is ours now, we own it, we got the trademark on the genealogy. But people don't want to work, and the more they get weak and they can't have quality health care and good food, the more they don't want to work because somebody else that's more downtrodden and less than them will do it. What happens is we get weak and we become more susceptible to ills and more susceptible to things that we wouldn't otherwise if we had a heightened conscience. We work together. But that's neither here nor there. You've asked me to talk about illnesses. These are the concepts that are, in my mind, contributing towards not getting better fixes for them sooner, or focusing on that. Look at when Steve Jobs, did the phone and everything. All right, everybody just flocked to that. Why? Because, there's something in it for everybody. They're willing to give their information away. They're willing to let it dominate their lives. They're willing to embrace something like that for the fun or the power that they think it gives them. And they don't even really know what it's going to do to us in the long run. We're still a Neanderthal, caveman type reality mentality. We're just 100 or 120, 150 years from the cowboys. We don't even have a way to really understand sustainability and what we should be working towards. But let's talk about if we have an illness, if we're grieving for someone that has an illness. I don't even know that I'm qualified to talk about this. When my grandmother was dying, and she had hospice care, and I could have gone over every night. It was hard battling in Orlando to get all the way from downtown Orlando to Longwood, and it could take an hour. The traffic there is horrible. I could have gone over every night and watched Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune and talked with her and had dinner. But I only went sometimes. What's wrong with me? Why on earth would I devalue someone like that? because my family was alive and at home, and they needed me too. They didn't have health problems. My grandmother had the health problems, and it was going to cause her to die. Of course, it's old age too. But what is wrong with me that I don't take that one time to grab a bigger piece of that? I don't know that I'm qualified to talk about this. I feel ashamed. The perspective, the overall perspective I had just was not good enough. I am about raising consciousness of others and of myself, and I work on myself every day. But at that time, I was lower than I would have liked. As I go along and I get to a better place, I look at myself and I go, that's just terrible. I hope you're not as bad right now to your future self as you were then to yourself now. What should we do to talk to people about illnesses? What should we do to comfort them? Well, I would value them. Because if someone is ill, or say they have problem like retardation or other factors like that, it shows us that the human condition is not perfect. And a lot of times we can think, oh, let's cut that off, throw it out, and keep the good stuff, trim it away. Keep the good stuff, focus on the good stuff, focus on our selfishness. But if we take, and every time something's not going well for someone and we devalue them, we miss the opportunity to think of what they could be, to be an example for us of, well, I'm not that, but how do I act towards someone that's that? As if I was that. And again, we're getting into biblical teachings. What we'd be doing is learning to apply the golden rule, the highest commandment, the loving your brother as yourself in Jesus' teachings with love, as you would want done unto you. And so when I would say someone's dying, or someone's less than us, or they have a learning disability, or they're ill, it should be they should be glorified and lifted, because we can learn from them. And at the time, if they're able to think and feel good about what they can learn, they can also learn from themselves and their own condition. And we can help them to do that if we are the example. And while they're doing that, they can realize much more power in all the other things they do have. Yes, they're being weakened. Yes, something's against them they can't seem to overcome. Yes, it may bring death. It may bring pain. It may bring long rehabilitation. Well, what would a person like that want? If you were that person, what would you want during that time? You would want to take and amplify everything else that you do have to the highest it can be. If you lose your sight, they say that your smell and your hearing and all your other senses become more important to you. Well, I would say if you have somebody that's ill, look at them like that. Look at the value that they bring in your contemplation. I'm bringing that contemplation to them and say, look at how valuable you are in other ways. Because you've been forced to go through this, you're going to help me and others. Let's help you help yourself. Let's help you realize that all the other things you are life experiences that you can gain from during this difficult time. Now I've talked and I've rambled, and I could focus this down, but I didn't really know exactly how I was going to relate this to you when I started. I believe that these thoughts that I'm sharing are worthwhile. I believe they're worth making a life about. I believe they're worth being paid for. I don't charge. I don't try to get paid for them. But whenever I have an opportunity to give them to anybody that listens or cares, I do. Because I've come from a place where I was less. I understand and I've analyzed that. I would suggest that wherever you are, it's less than you could be. And even the person that looks like they're ill or they're failing and they're falling and they're going towards death, they're less than they can be. Not only to you and others, but to themselves. I would suggest you use Conscious Counseling 101 ideas and perspectives and tools on them and yourself every day to elevate them until we get ahead of solving the problems with illnesses and other things of that nature. Until we do, let's continue to rise and focus on what's important and help each other to focus on what's important. That's the best use of our energies, whether we're dying or we're thriving. And that's what I have to offer on this topic for today. I'm Paul Roberts, and this is Conscious Counseling 101.